Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we really get into the weeds, pull out the fascinating bits from some pretty specific sources, and give you that shortcut to being, well, genuinely in the know.
Exactly. Cutting through the noise.
Before we jump into what turns out to be a surprisingly detailed, almost like historical rabbit hole today, we need to make our required declaration.
Ah, yes, the necessary part.
This deep dive is being distributed completely free of charge across all the major platforms, and it's purely for educational purposes. We're focusing just on the information presented in the source.
And what a source it is today.
It really is. Our mission today is to take a close look, a real deep dive, into Session 2 of the Early Sessions, Book 1 of the Seth material. Now, this one was recorded way back on Wednesday, December 4th, 1963.
A very early session, hence the title.
Right, and we're diving into a dialogue that, according to the notes, needed, soft lights, maybe pulling the shades. It feels like it required a bit of nerve from the people involved.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's key to remember who those people were. We often just say Rob and Jane, but this is Jane Roberts, just starting out, really, as this channel or medium, and her husband, Robert Butts, who meticulously took down everything.
Record keeper.
Precisely. And this session gets personal fast because the contact, this entity, Frank Watts, starts talking about past lives they supposedly shared. You can almost feel the tension and the sheer curiosity in the notes. They're nervous, but they also really want to see where this goes, especially after starting with the Ouija board.
It sets a scene, doesn't it?
It really does. And before we get into those, let's call them juicy details, because some are quite challenging, we absolutely have to credit the source properly.
Yes, crucial.
For anyone wanting to explore this foundational material themselves, and we really do encourage you, become a student of it, you need to know it's the Seth material, published by the New Awareness Network.
And you can find this specific material, dig into it yourself.
Exactly. We strongly urge you to check out the books. Visit the New Awareness Network website. Their bookstore is online at sethcenter.com/theearlysessions. That's SETHCENTER.com/theearlysessions. Studying the actual material gives you the full context.
Which is vital, especially with something like this. Okay, let's get into the atmosphere of this session first, because the setup is just perfect for that kind of chilling, but also kind of fascinating vibe we're going for.
Right. The notes say Rob and Jane tried to recreate the conditions of their first successful session, shades pulled down, soft lights, trying to get back into that same receptive state.
But there's this immediate sense of vulnerability, isn't there? It says they were, and I'm quoting here, half afraid to begin for fear that nothing would happen.
That bit really stands out. It perfectly captures their mindset. They're inviting something unknown back, and there's no guarantee it'll work again. It grounds the whole thing in a very human, experimental uncertainty.
And then, boom, contact. It's almost jarringly simple. They ask the question, very directly, "Are you there, Frank Watts?"
And the answer, through the board, presumably, is just yes. One word. Cuts right through that fear and anticipation.
Sets a tone of confidence, maybe. But Watts, or whoever this is, immediately shows he's not here for, simple Q&A about his recent life.
Not at all. Rob and Jane try to pin him down, geographically. Where did Frank Watts spend most of his life?
Elmira. Okay, straightforward enough.
Then where were you born?
State Saint.
So they assume State Street in Elmira, naturally.
Makes sense, but no. The pointer spells out no.
And right there, the personality starts to emerge. He's correcting them, controlling the information flow. When they push for the city, what does he say?
Not a city name. He says long time ago, shifting from place to time.
Exactly. He's immediately establishing that he operates outside their linear geographical frame of reference. He's setting the rules for the conversation.
Okay, but then comes the bit that always gets me. It feels dramatic, maybe too dramatic. They ask for the state he was born in.
And he gives that classic cryptic line.
State of sorrow. I mean, come on. It's a great line, very atmospheric, very chilling. But isn't it also just a bit evasive? For an entity who supposedly remembers the 6th century, why not just say New York or Pennsylvania or wherever it was?
That's a really fair challenge, and you could see it as a dodge.
Yeah.
But what if we look at it differently? Maybe it's less about geography, less about a U.S. state, and more about consciousness.
How do you mean?
Well, maybe the state of sorrow is the most accurate description he can give from his perspective. Perhaps it reflects the dominant emotional tone or the experiential reality of that particular lifetime, or even his current state reflecting back on it.
So feeling over fact.
Kind of. It makes him less like a database spitting out info and more like a personality, capable of metaphor, of poetry almost.
Hmm.
He's choosing to communicate the feeling of that existence, not just the mailing address. It tells us something about him, the entity.
Okay, reframing it that way.
Okay.
It makes a bit more sense. It's certainly memorable. And it leads into his main instruction for them, doesn't it? When they ask for a message.
Yes. He says, study and learn. And what should they study and learn?
Truths. Very direct. Very focused on understanding on the fundamentals. It really sits that learner persona we try to cultivate with these deep dives.
Absolutely. And that naturally leads them to the big question, the core metaphysical query they probably wanted to ask from the start.
Right. They just come out and ask it, is there such a thing as reincarnation?
And he confirms it, laying the groundwork for so much of the later Seth material right here in session 2. He says, a life. Several. Yes.
Simple, but profound in this context. And they follow up immediately. How many lives has he had on Earth?
And he gives a specific number. 3. 3 previous lives. That sets the stage for the rest of the session, really. They now have a framework to explore.
Okay, let's follow that framework. 3 lives. Let's go back, way back first, to the oldest life he mentions, the 6th century.
Yeah, this is the earliest point he gives them. And the details are surprisingly specific. Even if a bit garbled initially, they ask what he was back then.
And the pointer apparently spells out something like, "Soul do know," at first.
Right, a little fumble, which actually adds a touch of realism, maybe. But then it clarifies, soldier, a military life.
Okay, 6th century, soldier. Where? Who is he fighting for?
He says, Rosette, Turks. That's a fascinating anchor. It places him right in the mix of the early Turkic migrations and conflicts, probably somewhere across Central Asia or Eurasia,
Yeah.
a period of huge upheaval.
Definitely a turbulent time. Now, here's a detail that often gets glossed over, but I think it's really intriguing. How did that life end? You'd assume a soldier in the 6th century fighting for the Turks probably died violently.
That would be the logical assumption, yes. Battlefield casualty.
But he explicitly denies that. When they ask if he died in battle, the answer is simply no.
And that no opens up a whole field of speculation, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just a throwaway line like the original outline suggested. If a 6th century soldier in that volatile region didn't die in battle, how did he die?
Exactly. What are the alternatives back then?
Well, historically speaking, for soldiers of that era, the biggest killer often wasn't the enemy's weapon. It was disease.
Like dysentery, plague.
Typhus. Infections. The stuff that ripped through camps and armies. Or it could have been something else entirely. Political intrigue, an accident. Maybe he actually survived the fighting and died later, of old age, or some common ailment.
So the fact that he specifies not in battle, it suggests maybe a quieter end, less dramatic than his profession might imply.
It could. It denies the expected narrative and grounds that life, perhaps, in a more mundane, historically probable reality of mortality. A quiet death after a potentially violent life. It's a subtle but significant detail.
Okay, fascinating. Now let's shift perspective. To Watts now, wherever now is for him, they asked about his memory.
Yes, the question is direct. Frank Watts, do you recall all of your previous lives, where you are now?
And the answer?
An unequivocal yes, complete recall. He claims to have access to a full memory bank of these 3 lives, and presumably whatever happened in between.
That claim itself is huge. Consciousness outside the body retains total memory of past incarnations.
It's a core concept. But what's equally fascinating, and perhaps more significant in terms of understanding the limit to this entity, is the very next question they ask.
The logical follow-up. If you remember the past perfectly, can you see the future? They ask, do you know when you will return to Earth the next time?
And the answer is just as direct as the yes about the past.
It's no.
A simple no. And that, I think, needs real emphasis. It sets a crucial boundary. Perfect memory of the past, yes. But the future, his own future trajectory, apparently unknowable, even to him.
So it suggests that free will, or maybe just inherent uncertainty about the future, still applies, even from that perspective.
It certainly seems to imply that. The past is fixed, recorded information that can be accessed. The future remains open, potential, unwritten. It limits his omniscience in a very specific way.
That's a massive philosophical point embedded right there. Past is data, future is possibility. Wow. Okay, before they get too lost in that, Watts pulls it right back to them, to Rob and Jane sitting there at the board.
He drops the bombshell connection. He says he knew both of them 3 centuries ago.
So, leaping forward from the 6th century, skipping over whatever the war life was for a moment, we land about 1,000 years later, in the 17th century.
Exactly. Time frame, 3 centuries ago. Location. Initially, he gives this evocative description. Country far away, ocean.
Poetic.
A little bit, yeah. But then he confirms it. Denmark. This sets the stage for the most detailed and, frankly, the most controversial part of the whole session.
Okay, 17th century Denmark. Rob and Jane must have been leaning in at this point. The big question, what was our relationship back then?
And this is where it gets really interesting, especially for them personally. Watts reveals they were father and son.
A direct family link. And who was who?
Robert Butts, the careful note-taker in 1963, was supposedly the father. The record notes he was identified just by the letter U.
Okay, and Jane Roberts, the channel.
She was the son.
That role reversal, the fluidity of gender across lifetimes, that's a theme that comes up again and again in this material, isn't it? It immediately challenges our fixed ideas about identity.
Absolutely. It's fundamental. And Watts places himself right in the middle of this family unit, his relationship to them back then.
He says, friend close.
Suggesting he was tightly woven into their lives, either personally or perhaps through business. A trusted associate.
And then the details start coming thick and fast. Specifics about their lives. Rob, the father, what did he do?
He was a landowner, and his business, farms. So a man of property, rooted in the Danish countryside, likely with a stable agrarian income.
Stability, that seems key. And Watts even pinpoints a specific location tied to Rob's land holdings.
Yes, he names a place, Eastern Roads.
Yeah.
And this is where, for students of the material, a little bell should ring. The session notes mention that this exact phrase, Eastern Roads, had actually come through in an earlier preliminary session.
Suggesting a connection, a recurring theme, or a genuine memory trace being accessed.
It implies continuity, at least. Whether it's the psychic anchor point or just Watts repeating himself, it's a notable detail. But the geography quickly gets strange.
Okay, so Rob the landowner lived in Denmark. Where, exactly?
Watts names a city, Treve, T-R-I-E-V.
Uh-huh.
He says Rob was born there, lived there for 56 years. Seems solid.
But then they ask the obvious question, where is Treve now? Can we find it on a map?
And the answer is, well, chilling. He just says, gone now.
Gone now. A lost city. Vanished from history, apparently. This adds such a layer of mystery, doesn't it? It's almost too convenient for verification, but it creates this incredible atmosphere.
It does. Is it a genuine lost place or a narrative device?
Mm-hmm.
Hard to say. But Watts confirms he also lived in Treve. Same duration, 56 years. Born there too. But crucially, he didn't die there.
Right. Which brings us to his profession in this 17th century Danish life. What was Frank Watts doing back then?
He confirms he was a merchant. M-E-R-C-H-E-N-T. A merchant.
Okay, a merchant friend of the landowner? Makes sense.
But not just any merchant. He specifies exotic. His trade? Spices.
Exotic spices. Okay, now we have a picture. Frank Watts, the 17th century exotic spice merchant living in the now lost city of Treve, close friends with Rob, the stable landowner.
It's quite a cinematic image, isn't it? The grounded farmer and the potentially more worldly, risk-taking merchant dealing in high-value goods. That contrast is interesting.
It really is. But the detail that completely overshadows everything else in the section, the one that makes you sit up and say, wait, what? Concerns Jane's identity, the son.
Ah, yes. So Jane, playing the son in this lifetime, what did the son grow up to do? Watts says he became a painter, confirmed specifically as an artist.
Okay, an artist son of a landowner. Plausible enough. They must have asked for his name, right?
They did. And this is the moment that, frankly, blows the doors off the session in terms of specific, testable claims. The name spelled out is Van Dyck Younger.
Van Dyck Younger. Not just an artist, a specific name linked to one of the most famous families in art history. Anthony Van Dyck, the Flemish master.
Exactly. And Watts confirms this artist's works are known today. He says, yes, truths. This is huge. It moves the whole thing from private channeling into the realm of public historical verification, or at least potential verification.
The younger part is key, though, isn't it? Anthony Van Dyck, the famous one, died in the 1641. If this son lived, as Watts later says, for 80 years. Well, the timing gets interesting depending on when he was born relative to Rob's 56 years in Treve.
Precisely. The younger suggests perhaps a son, a nephew, a follower, someone working in that style or lineage active later in the 17th century. It shows an awareness, at least, of the famous name.
Okay, let's play skeptic for a moment. This is the point where you have to ask, isn't this claim just too much? Too specific, too famous, too convenient almost? Does it undermine the credibility?
It's definitely the point that raises the highest skeptical eyebrow. Why Van Dyck Younger? Why not a lesser-known Danish painter? If you were just making things up, wouldn't you pick something harder to check?
Maybe. Or maybe pick something famous to make it sound more impressive.
That's the other possibility. But by naming someone potentially identifiable, even with the younger caveat, Watts gives them and us something concrete to research. It's either incredibly audacious, a fabrication, or something else. It's certainly not vague.
And he adds more details about this artist's son.
Yes, he says this Van Dyck Younger lived 80 years. And when asked if he had siblings, the answer is no, an only child. Again, specific biographical details attached to this monumental claim.
It definitely makes the 17th century Denmark the spiciest section, as the outline called it. Exotic spices, lost cities, famous artists. It's packed.
Absolutely. But Watts, the spice merchant, didn't stay in Denmark, remember? He died elsewhere.
Right. He ended up in Sweden. Why did he move? Why leave Triev and the landowner friend?
The reason given is blunt and practical. Money.
Ah, the universal motivator.
Indeed. And when they press him on how money was involved, he specifies ships. And what were the ships carrying?
Let me guess. Cargo spice.
Bingo. It links directly back to his profession. This suggests a significant business move, transporting valuable, high-risk spice cargo from Denmark to Sweden in the 17th century. That implies investment, expansion, maybe seeking better markets or fleeing instability. It fits his profile as the mobile merchant, contrasting with Rob, the rooted landowner. He followed the money, via ship, with his exotic goods. It paints a vivid picture of the risks and rewards of that trade back then. Pepper, cloves, nutmeg. These were like gold. Moving a cargo was a major undertaking.
And that move ultimately led him to where he died, his second death, as recorded in this session.
Yes, location, Sweden, city, Stockholm.
Okay, Stockholm. Do they get a date?
They do, and it includes a fascinating little detail of uncertainty. He gives the year as 1655 uncertain. That uncertain is interesting. Does it mean his memory isn't quite perfect? Or that the date itself was ambiguous?
It adds a touch of realism, maybe. Not everything recalled with crystal clarity.
Possibly. And then the cause of death in Stockholm in 1655.
It was dramatic. Fire.
A fiery end for the exotic spice merchant. And this is where that odd word pops up again.
Right. The word gratis. It appeared earlier, connected to Jane or Denmark, and it appears here again, seemingly linked to the word fire.
It's so out of place. Gratis, Latin for free, without charge. What on earth is it doing here next to a 17th century death by fire in Stockholm?
Any theories? It seems completely random.
It's baffling. Could it be some kind of linguistic tactic from the source? A fragment from another layer of consciousness? A meta-commentary? Was the death unexpected, free of charge in some metaphorical sense?
Or maybe stretching it, a comment on the information itself being given freely, like here's this detail gratis.
That's a possibility too, given the context of channeled information often presented as a gift. We honestly don't know. But its appearance twice in such specific context makes it a linguistic anomaly worth noting in this session. It adds another layer of weirdness.
Definitely weird. So, death by fire, Stockholm, circa 1655. That's life number 2 accounted for. The 6th century soldier, the 17th century merchant. What about the third life? The one presumably between the merchant and the Frank Watts identity they were talking to.
They try to get there. They ask where he was born for that third lifetime.
And the answer is just one word, heavy with implication.
War.
Just war. And then silence on that topic. The notes say they didn't pursue it further.
Right. They just leave it hanging there. A life born literally into war.
Why stop there? It seems like such a crucial bridge between the 17th century and his 20th century Frank Watts persona.
I suspect a couple of things might have been going on. One, they might have just been overwhelmed. The sheer density of the 17th century information, especially that Van Dyck Younger claim, probably took a lot of processing.
Yeah, that would scramble your circuits a bit.
And two, a life born into war. Depending on when that was, it could be getting uncomfortably close to their own time. World War I, World War II, maybe even the American Civil War. It might have felt too recent, too raw, or just too complex to unpack right then.
So it becomes this dramatic, unexplored cliffhanger. We see the progression, ancient soldier, early modern merchant, and then straight into conflict for the next round.
It suggests a potential trajectory, a cycle perhaps, that remains incomplete in this session's narrative. It definitely leaves you wanting to know more about that third life.
Absolutely. But Watts seems ready to wrap things up. He takes control again at the end.
He does. Just like he started with defining the terms, he ends by setting the schedule for the next meeting. Very specific instructions.
Oh, does he say?
Next contact requested at 9 night Friday, 9 o'clock Friday night.
Precise.
Uh,
Almost businesslike after all that drama about past lives and lost cities and fires.
it brings it right back down to earth, doesn't it? Back to the practical reality of their experiment in their living room. Appointment set, session over.
Okay, so let's just quickly recap the wild ride that was session 2. We went from Rob and Jane being nervous to this entity Frank Watts being dramatically evasive with lines like state of sorrow.
Then conforming reincarnation and a framework of 3 specific past lives for himself.
Life 1. A 6th century soldier fighting for the Turks who notably did not die in battle.
Life 2, the big one, 17th century Denmark. Was as an exotic spice merchant, friend to Rob, who was a landowner in the lost city of Treve, dealing in farms on eastern roads.
And the bombshell. Jane, in that life, was the landowner's artist's son, identified with astonishing specificity as Van Dyck Younger.
A claim that demands attention, whether you believe it or not. And Watts, the merchant, moved his spice cargo to Sweden and died in a fire in Stockholm around 1655, possibly gratis.
And finally, the third life, born simply into war, left unexplored before the session ends with a specific appointment for Friday night.
It's an incredibly dense session. What this deep dive gives you are those tangible nuggets. The names, the dates, the places, the professions. These are the things that invite critical thinking, just like Watts told them to do. Study and learn. Truths.
The value isn't necessarily in just swallowing the claims whole, but in grappling with them, analyzing the details, the structure, the implications.
Precisely. And we really hope you do continue to study and learn from this material. Remember, today's source was Session 2 from the Early Sessions, Book 1 of the Seth material.
And again, we absolutely encourage you to dive deeper yourself. Check out the Seth material books and visit the publisher New Awareness Network online. Their website again.
It's sethcenter.com/the early sessions. That's SETHCENTER.com/the early sessions.
Okay, so before we wrap up, here's that final thought for you to chew on, playing with the connections from that 17th century life.
All right, let's hear it.
Watts was the merchant, dealing in high-value, risky, exotic cargo spices. Jane's past self was the artist, creating tangible works with specialized materials, pigments, oils. If that pattern held, if they connected again in our time, what would be the modern equivalents?
Interesting.
What's today's exotic cargo? Maybe something digital, like crypto, or ethically complex, like rare earth minerals. And what's the art form? Is it digital art, NFTs, AI-generated imagery, virtual reality experiences?
That's a fascinating parallel. The underlying dynamic might be the same. The exchange of value, tangible or intangible, risky or creative, just expressed through contemporary means.
Yeah.
The merchant and the artist finding new forms for their connection.
Something to think about. What kind of modern spice trade and art market might link souls across time today?
Definitely something to mull over. It bridges that historical gap in a thought-provoking way.
Indeed. Well, that's all for this deep dive. Until next time, keep digging, keep questioning those details, and keep studying those truths. Goodbye for now.
Goodbye, everyone.